My name is Vera Tolbert, but my maiden name, actually, I started off with my mother's name. My mother's maiden name, I was called Vera Eastman for a while. And then I took on my father's name, Yusufu, Vera Yusufu. And then I was married to a Tolbert. So, of course, now I'm Vera Tolbert. But my mother is Teresa Eastman Mason, and who passed away in 2005. And her her father's people all came from Barbados. So her father, Nathaniel Eastman, or there were, I think, three brothers that came along. Two ended up in Liberia, and then one actually ended up in Sierra Leone. So she comes from that lineage from Nathaniel Eastman, and they all went to Crozierville. And I know some of his siblings that I'm aware of that also live in Crozierville were the Warners and Jeannie Warner. We always were at her house. And Jeannie, we call her, and Lou, they were all in Crozierville, and that's where we spent quite a few weekends in Crozierville with the family. And I was very young, but I still remember those days, being in Crozierville. It was really nice. Yeah. I call Mama that soft, small giant. Mama, the Eastmans are all very petite, but there was this softness about her that was very, very comforting. Even when you knew Mama wasn't around, you knew she was still there with you. Very soft-spoken and very sweet. And we lived on Front Street for a while, where her mother, owned the entire property. Grandma, Louise Hoot Adams was her name. And I say that way because even growing up there in that neighborhood, Mama, I thought she was just this very soft and sweet person. And we moved up to Benson Street. And the one thing I really admired of her is that she was practically the mother of the neighborhood. Everybody practically came to our house, and I would never forget the sermon my brother preached at the funeral when my mother passed, and it was called In My Mother's House. And he depicted it so well that Mom's house was like an open door. Everybody came in and out, because she just served everybody. And I watched her very keenly. And I remember when I moved away from home, I was living in Germany, and people would ask me certain things about the way I dressed and the way I acted sometimes. And I always said to them, I'm trying so hard to be like Mom, and even now in the church that I attend, I'm the only one that go with a hat. Now we have two other ladies that will wear hats, and they all would ask me the question, why do you? I said, look, my mom wore those hats very well. And I always wanted to be so much like her. So it was a thing where I wanted to talk like her. I wanted to be like her, to the point where I wanted to be a police officer because she was. But she was just such a darling, just a sweetheart. And to the point where when I wasn't home and thought about doing something that I knew wasn't right, I didn't do it because I felt I would be disappointing her, because she was such a darling person and so caring. And even when she didn't have it, you could see how she would go out of her way just to take care of her children. And I'm getting a little emotional now, but it's just even in her death, I still don't feel left or alone. And many times I look at her picture and I say, Mama, I thank you so much for everything that you did for me, because she always wanted the best for us, and not only for us, her biological kids, even those children that lived with us from the interior. She still treated them well, that today I call them my foster brothers and sisters. So she was such a wonderful person. Yeah. Even if, I remember Louise and I packing up a little bag to go on the beach one time, and we kind of did it secretly, and we're going to tell her we're on our way to see some friends. And I remember we just stood in front of her. We said, okay, Mama, we on our way, out to our friends, and we'll be back later. She said, She said, I don't think you guys are going to go through that front door. And I said, and when I looked at her, she said, what are you guys trying to do to me? And we both look at her like, what is she talking about? And she said, I know. She said, I know you guys are not just going to friends. She said, don't do this to me. She said, so whatever you have packed, unpack it, and you're not going anywhere. So it was that scary that she even knew that. And so when I lived in Germany, I called her, I think almost every weekend, and would talk, but I always felt safe and protected in Germany because I knew I had the feeling she knew exactly what I was doing when I was in Germany. So she was very loving, but loving and straight, in a very nice way. So you always had a sense of, I don't care how she talked to you. And she beat us. We had our beatings and everything, but you somehow could not get mad at her because eventually you realize she did it for the best. And when I went to Germany, I wrote her this 2-3 page letter. And in the letter, I remember thanking her for all the beatings and all the yellings and all the screamings, because when I looked at myself compared to other friends that I had, I saw the difference and I saw what her training had, done for me, and her being straight and very, and she took to her word, and she was not wavering. But even with that, she would be straight, but you knew she wanted the best for you. So in the end, you were very grateful, for the discipline that you got, but she was very, very straight. So we didn't dare say or do anything out of the ordinary or out of the way where you knew mama's going to get you. Because if you did, you were going to get the beating. So it was, so it wasn't, I mean, at the time we were going through it as a kid, you got mad at times, but when I grew up, I thank her for every beating. And, I remember her calling for her police belt, because she was in the police force. And when mama said, get my police belt, you knew what that meant. You're going to get the beating, and you took it. And when she said, go and break off a branch off the bitter leaf tree outside, you knew what that meant. You were going to get it. But I would give her a lot of credit for elementary school when I saw some parents come into the school and discipline their kids in front of the entire class. I thought it was a horrifying thing, and mama never did that. If she thought or she got any call that something had happened in the school, she dealt with you at home. And so I always admired her for not embarrassing us. But at the same time, if somebody came with a complaint, you were always wrong until proven, you prove yourself right. So if somebody said, Vera, this sort of stuff, I said, Mama, I didn't do it. Her point was, okay, you now have to explain to me, let me understand that you really didn't do it. Otherwise you did, so very, very important. And I remember we went to a public school, we went to demonstration school, but my mother always said to us, when we're done with elementary school, her point was, you're going to find what school you want to go to, and I'll pay for it. I don't care how much it costs. So I remember when it came to high school, Louise and I had to decide what school we wanted to go to, and I decided I wanted to go to CW. And Louise decided that, but she's going to BWI, but she didn't want to go to the stuck-up school. And I took, of course, the entrance and got in. And I remember when I returned home, I said to my mom, I said, Mama, it's very expensive though. I said, I can find another school. And she was like, oh no. She says, that where you want to go? I said, yes. And she said, well, then you're going to go there. I didn't ask her if she was going to get the money or whatever. I just always thought she had it tough because she had all those kids on her by herself. God never saw any man, even my stepfather, really do anything for my mom. So thank God for her mother, who had all this property. So when she passed, my mother was able to inherit all of that. And I think that's what helped. So she put us all in the best schools that I thought Liberia could offer. I was on boarding school also on Brumley for 3 years before I went to CWE, but that was her thing. Her kids were going to get the education, and then we can make up our mind later on what we wanted to do. But I remember when I finally got my master's degree, that she finally turned to me. She said, "Vera, you've done so well, and I'm so proud of you." She said, "But now you need to stop and get married." And I said, "Oh no, Mama, I'm not done yet." And she goes, "What?" But I was always very grateful to see how she took that very seriously. And even again, the guys from the interior that lived with us, her point was, even if they had to go to the afternoon school, they went, but her thing was everybody had to have an education, and we didn't have any say in it. And if you decided you didn't want to go to school, then the trouble started. But well, she started with us at a very early age, where we also then got to see the importance of it, and that meant a lot, to us. Well, she put us in the best schools. Yeah. Growing up, I remember when I was living on Front Street as a kid, I loved teaching. And I was in elementary school. I would gather the entire neighborhood kids and put them on the steps, and every day after school, I sat them all together and did my whole teaching and helped them with their homework and everything. So all along, that was in the back of my mind. I was going to be a teacher, and of course, then when I fell in love so much with my mom and just loved everything that she did, I thought, okay, I'll be a police officer because that's what Mama is doing, and until she, realized in high school that I was very good at math and everybody thought I was going to be a mathematician. And then when I got to the university, by that time, I saw what direction I wanted to go into, and I went into the sciences. And I started off at LU in the sciences, did biology for 2 years. And then I went over to Germany. But I think Germany was more my father's dream. My father had lived in Germany for many years and loved it. So he came and got me when the coup took place, and he got afraid when things were happening, when people said they were going to get rid of all the Congo people. He got afraid, okay, my daughter's going to be one of those Congo people to get rid of. So he came and got me out of the country and took me to Germany for school. But he always, somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought about it, but being a doctor, but I don't think it was ever my dream. It was my father's dream. And it came from Mama. Her thing was whatever you want to be. So I went into the sciences, and when I got to Germany, actually I got accepted into medical school. At that time, I had 2 years of college at the University of Liberia. But things didn't go the way I expected and the way, I would have liked in Germany. So of course, I left Germany and came to the US, did continue to the sciences, got my master's, and then at that point, got back to Germany, got my doctorate in biology, and went into medical research for 12 and a half years. And I really enjoyed it, being in research. And while in research, at the same time, I still in the back of my mind kept thinking about teaching. I never really got to teach, but I got to do a lot in Germany with being head of the laboratory, so being in charge of all the medical students, teaching them laboratory skills, and being, supervisor on all of their doctoral work. And so it was very exciting. So I still got a little bit of that in, my teaching skills, what I thought I had as a kid. I still was able to use that. So I've been in medical research for most of my career in the US and in Germany. And after 12 and a half years in medical research, I got tired and decided to get out. And now I did stay in the sciences and came to Blue Cross and was with Blue Cross for 13 years, where I actually still work in writing policies, looking at all the research for the new drugs, procedures, devices, and I had to make a decision whether we're going to cover them or not cover them. So I was able to stay at least afloat with what was going on in the research world, medical research, for many years. But now I still work with insurance company, not Blue Cross, with another one now, and I do regulatory compliance. So, so it's been a pretty, I would say, wonderful journey. I haven't regretted anything. I haven't, I don't want to go back and redo anything. I think everything is going pretty well, and I've enjoyed my work so well that when I got out of the lab, actually I missed it so much, I tried to get back into the lab. And that's when I actually got my doctorate. When I went back to Germany and got my doctorate, I actually dedicated my book, my thesis, to my mother.
Oh.
So when I came back from Germany, she was in a nursing home in Rhode Island, and I brought my thesis and handed it to her. And I said, Mama, this is all yours. Thank you so much. And I remember one of the nurses came to me and she said, are you Vera? I said, yes. She said, you're Teresa's daughter? I said, yes. Are you the one in Germany? I said, yes, I am. And she said, what a beautiful thing. I said, why? She said, she doesn't put that thesis anywhere other than right to her heart. If I meet any woman right now, Black woman that did not have challenges, I'll grab her and hug her and ask her how she didn't have it, and what did she do differently. I think for the majority of us, it's been a challenge. And to tell you the truth, I actually think it's still till this day, at this age, I still feel that's if I have any regrets or any disappointments, it would be in that area that people never realize, never give you that credit and your perks. But I'll give an example. Even in Germany, when I was running the laboratory in Germany, the professor I worked with, Professor Weisenbach, I really love him. He was just a great mentor in the day. I'm still very good friends with him. So people will call the lab, and people were always calling him, and he will always say, just let Vera know, talk to Vera. So I remember going to a huge conference in Berlin, and with about 300 doctors and researchers in that room, his daughter was speaking, and when she was asked a question, she said, I would like to defer to my colleague, Dr. Vera Tolbert. And so I responded to the question. So after the meeting, someone came up to me and he said, you are Vera Tolbert? And I said, yes, I am, in the flesh. And he said, wow. And I said, you are? And he called his name. I've forgotten, doctor, whoever. And I said, oh, I remember you. Yes, you called the lab many times. But he kept looking at me. You're Vera Tolbert. And I said, I know, huh? Doesn't make sense, does it? I said, you've been thinking this Vera Tolbert that talked to you in your own language, German, must have been a white woman, And he said, no. I said, oh, yes, I'm sure that's what. I mean, we ended up getting to be very good friends. Mm-hmm. But it just showed the prejudice, that a Black woman couldn't do so well, especially in Germany. And then even in New York, when I work in the laboratory, I already had my master's degree when I was working in the lab in New York at Cornell Medical College in Manhattan. But when this Jewish lady ended up going to get her master's degree, and I remember the professor actually making this huge big deal of it, and said, oh, she's the first in the lab to get her master's degree. And I turned and went like, oops. He looked at me and I said, well, I thought I had one, but I guess maybe mine is not recognized. He felt really bad. And I just said, oh, well, that's okay. So I think I have missed out on getting some promotions because of that, where others, have gotten it and I haven't. And I've always just said I would just do what I think is right, and I'll do the best I can. And I wouldn't fight for it. And I'm fine with it. So, in the end, Cornell did try to get me to run the laboratory, but by that time I was ready to leave to go back to Germany. And I guess by that time they realized my values and what I brought to the table. And he actually begged me to come back to Cornell Medical College when I was done in Germany, but I turned him down. And I said, no, I wouldn't come back. I think my services are needed somewhere else. And it was, it was good here in Philadelphia. I've been here for the past now 16 years. So I've worked here the longest. Um, I've also been disappointed, but that's just corporate America, I think, for all of us. Whether black or white female, that's corporate America, for you. I got fed up with one corporate America, went to one I thought was a little mellow, and that's where I am now. So that's been my disappointment in my career, that I think people did not recognize, my values and what I brought to the table. So I didn't get certain promotions, but that's okay. This is my advice to all of the young women, especially our Black women, wanting to go into the sciences and STEM education. I said, do it, and if you love it. I think the world is changing drastically, and I'm very happy about that. And I think people are getting to realize that we bring a lot to the table, and things are changing slightly. I know I say I'm a little disappointed that I may not have gotten as high as I thought I would or I should have been, but I say that's I think those places I have worked now regret it, and they have their regrets now, and I can just move on with my life. But my thing is just always be honest and just be who you are, and do the very best that you can to the best of your ability. Don't let anybody scare you or make you feel less than who you are. That's one advice I always give my nieces and nephews when I go to the graduation. I always say to them, now you're facing the world. The world is out there waiting for you. I said, don't ever feel bad about any problem that you did not create for anybody. And I always try to be very direct when I tell them what that means. I said, now you're Black. So out there, you are going to face, all of the pushback because you're a Black person. That's just a given. I said, but that is a problem that you did not create for this person. So don't ever let that stop you from doing what you need to do. A young Russian student in Germany worked with me in the laboratory, and I remember when I was orienting her the first couple of days, I took her to the city and I was just showing her downtown, and she turned and she looked at me. I think it was the third day she had been there. She turned and looked at me and she said, "How do you do it?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "How do you do it going around knowing that people may not like you, but you just keep going?" And I looked at her and I smiled. I said, "Sweetheart, and the fact that people do not like me is a problem that I did not create for them. So I'm not going to occupy my time or waste my time with that problem that I did not create for them. That's a problem they have to deal with. They're the person that don't like me. I didn't say I didn't like them. So that's a problem they have to deal with. So I always tell my nieces and nephews, now you're going to face the world. The real world is out there. Do not worry yourself about a problem that you did not create for people. So you know who you are, and you know how good you are at. And they may not want to admit it. We are actually better when it comes to academics. We're very good. And I think a lot of us have not excelled, and I'm using the word us, because I think sometimes we felt, this pushback, and we've stayed in our corner. And I've had a lot of people tell me that, Vera, why don't you speak up more? Even my bosses. And I always say, well, everybody seems to have so much to say, and I just let them say what they need to say. And they always say, but when you say something, it has so much depth, but you don't say enough. And I said, because nobody will give you the chance to say it. I said, so you know who's missing out on it? Not me, it's you, because you wouldn't give me the chance not to say. But our young people now, I'm happy. I tell them, I said, even if they try not to give you the chance, just speak up. Speak up, be nice about it, be very smart about it, be very intelligent about it, and just do what you need to do. And somebody's going to recognize that and move you up. I said, so don't ever feel shy, or don't ever feel like someone is holding you back, because you cannot be held back. Traveling back to Liberia since I left. I left 1981, and I've been back, I think, four different times. Uh, when I went back 83 and 85, I went back actually to see my mother. So at the time I was in school in Germany, so I went back and I worked with bomb mines actually the first time. And that was really interesting because I was in Beaumont as a medical student, working with the German doctors. And it was nice because you saw how people treated you, and I would give our people credit. The one thing is, and I would say is, when you've done well, your people will let you know you've done well, and they will give you your kudos. And I was still a medical student, and people were treating me extremely well. So it was really nice being back in Liberia. But I've never really had the experience where I had to work in Liberia, and I think that's one thing I miss. That I've never had that experience. But the second time I went home, it was just to visit my mother at 85. And then when I went back to Germany, the following year I left Germany and came to the US. And the two times I've been back to Liberia since I've been in the US was actually for my mother's passing and my uncle's passing. So my mom and Uncle Ernest. So I didn't really get to see much, and I didn't really get to do much. And I'm very proud of my niece Lolia, who went back and went and visited the schools and spoke to the teachers. And I was so proud of her. I thought that was such a wonderful thing to do. My plan was actually, at one point, I was planning to go back to Liberia and teach at the university, and I was called. But when they called me, then they dropped the ball. And then the second time, that was the University of Liberia. The second time, Tubman University wanted me to go back and teach. And I actually talked to my job here. So I'll go back, and I told them I was going to take a leave of absence. But then I had to not do that because the fear of me coming back here and not having a job, that kind of scared me a little. Because I noticed the HR department wasn't too keen on me taking a leave of absence for that length of time, and I wanted at least a year. I was hoping to go for a year, see how things are, and if it's okay, then I'll move to Liberia. If it's not, I can still come back to my job. So I haven't really had the experience to go and really live a long time in Liberia to see what it's like after you left home and come back. And I keep saying that was stolen away from us. The war took that all away from us, that experience of coming abroad and then doing so well in Liberia. I didn't get that. But the visits were all very emotional, going back to Liberia, just seeing where you grew up and to see the destruction and the breakdown, in the system. I was very proud of neighbors, other people that I grew up with, to see the ones that survived all of the war and the bombing and the killings and the illness and everything. It was very emotional to see them still around, the ones that survived it. And every time I went back, the few times I went back, I started thinking about moving back home. Then when I got here, I thought about, oh no, probably not. So it's a back and forth. It's an emotional turmoil. I do think there will be a time where I will probably go back and forth regularly in the next 4 years when that happens, when I retire. But before then, I don't see myself going back to do anything right now. Hopefully, by the time I retire and I have the time, I will still be able to do what I've always wanted to do and to give back. Meaning I will probably go back to the university and probably do, and teach, teach a course and then come back here, and do something like that. I still want to do that, but I still feel that I need to give something back to Liberia. So hopefully I'll be able to do that in the next 4 years. My youngest brother that died during the war is called Theophilus Kweku Mensah. So Ernest Eastman is actually T. Ernest Eastman. The T is Theophilus. So my mother did name her baby after her baby brother. So I was looking at a picture of my youngest brother. I'm not sure. I know I have it somewhere here where he's sitting at a desk at Cottington, and there are bookshelves in the back. So I'm not sure if he was in the library. Someone took that picture of him. And the picture that we used on Uncle Ernest, the program for his funeral, he was sitting at a desk also, and it was very scary because it was a striking resemblance of the two. Because I look at the picture and I said, I've seen this picture somewhere, and I got a little confused. And then I ran and looked and I said, oh my God. I said, there's my brother and there's Uncle Ernest, and the two look exactly alike. And they're both sitting at a desk with the books behind. And it was just really, emotional at that point. And I said, now I see why she named her baby after him, because he must have looked like her brother so much. And she decided to name it. And now my nephew, from my oldest brother, who's also called Ernest Tolbert, was actually named again. My mom gave him that name from her brother Ernest. And my nephew Ernest was actually the one person that took care of my uncle until his death. And then he was ambassador for a long time in Tokyo. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he was one of the first set of people that came here to the US when it went through all the black and white thing, suffering. Ernest Eastman, in the midst of all that, he got his degree and then went back to Liberia, and of course got right away into the whole diplomatic field. He was standing right beside me, and then he turned to me and said, now, Vera, I'm telling you this, and I hope you'll carry on my wishes. And I said, what is it? He said, now, when I die, I want you to put me right beside my sister. And I said, okay, I hear you. So when we were discussing his funeral with Kumba, his daughter, Kumba and my cousin, the same cousin, Dor, we were on the phone discussing, because when he was sick, he was in Ghana, and my father was helping her with that. So we're in touch with them and with Kumba. So when things are really bad and we're discussing on the phone what we're going to do, and then Kumba asked the question, she said, well, I'm not sure where we're going to bury him. And I said, oh, I have that answer. She said, what is it? I said, your father asked me to make sure he was buried beside his sister, and we actually did that. So my mother is buried in between two Ernest Eastman. There's an Ernest Eastman Sr. and another Ernest Eastman. I don't know the senior, but it's a cousin. So she's buried in the middle of the two of them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. In fact, when he died, I remember the people here in Philadelphia, when they heard that was my uncle, and they all kept saying, and a guy actually turned to me and said, now I get it. And I said, what did you get? He said, I've been watching you, Vera, and I've been admiring you from a distance. I've been thinking there's something about her I can put my finger on. He said, but if you are Ernest Eastman's niece, he said, now I understand why you're the way you are, because Ernest Eastman was the greatest statesman that Liberia ever had. And I said, oh my God, that's nice to hear. And actually, when he died, I remember Sekou Kroma. I'm not sure if you know Sekou. Sekou was with the diplomatic field all his life. And Sekou actually turned to me. He said, the last statesman of Liberia has finally died. And I said, wow, that's a tribute to my uncle. Yeah. Check rice and gravy. We're doing a game one time, and it said, what's your favorite food? I said, well, guys, you don't know anything about this, but I'm going to boast about it. I said, because my mother and my aunt just seriously know how to make that check rice and gravy, and they know how to make that cornbread Sunday morning. I said, I love it too. And they go, really? And I said, I can't help it, but I love it. I think, yeah, I think my mother would love to be remembered by looking at her kids and seeing them all that they've done so well. Because I think that was her life's joining, or her what was her biggest assignment in life was to take care of these precious children that God had given her. And if I would personally add on to that, Mama, I think you should be remembered for the fact that you were a giant in one. Because even if my dad was alive, he will hear me say this. I didn't see any man help her out. And to see a woman take care of those 6 children plus her grandchildren, because she practically she practically took care of her grandchildren, because my nieces and nephews, the mother and I were talking one time, and I said, how can you not know how to take care of a kid? You had 4 children. And she looked at me and she said, Vera, I never took care of my children. And I said, well, who did? She said, your mother. And I said, oh, really? You know, so I, so I think my mom would love to be remembered that, you know, those children that she raised are all doing well today. And I think even that's why I say even in her death, I still try my best to do what I know would be pleasing to mama. If I know it's not going to be pleasing to mama, I don't do it. So people still ask me, who you trying, who you like or whatever. I say, I'm still trying to be mama. I'm still trying to be like her. I'm still trying to act like her, dress like her, talk like her, and just be that soft. And you know, I'm not a very soft person. I mean, I was very quiet growing up, and I got my mouth at one point, and I think I got it on Brahman Mission when I had to defend myself. But I'm still trying to be like mama, because recently when I talked, I got on the LU board, and I remember the one thing I said to them, I said, I don't want any position. I just want to be that soft voice in the background, you know, and that's all because that's who my mother was. Even in the church, she was the soft giant in the church. And she was part of the society. She was that, I mean, she got to be that grand, whatever. But you still, when you looked at her, she didn't look like the person that would be it. But she was this soft, quiet person that was just a giant. So when I spoke at her funeral, I said, you know, I said, uh, I'm speaking today of a woman that I've known as a small giant, because that's what she was. So I'm hoping, she is very pleased in her grave today to see that her children have done quite well, and I'm hoping it is pleasing to her. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent tribute.
I think when our future generation need to look at us and learn something. This is how they can show their gratitude to the ancestors. You see, they have to realize the sacrifices that the ancestors have made for them. What's his name? Sidney Poitier just died recently, and I remember watching that on TV, and I was deeply touched to see how he left. You know, he left the Bahamas at a very young age. I think 15 or 13, whatever. Came to New York, and then he rose to be that first person to pave the way for Black actors. And I think our children need to understand, you know, the way that the ancestors have paved for them. I always made a statement. I said, I think we Blacks were made to suffer, you know, because everywhere you go, Europe, here in the US, everywhere we just seem to be the underdog and you know, have to fight our way to the top. So our ancestors did that and fought their way to the top, or fought whatever way they could just to give their children a better path. So I hope that our children will realize that, and be very grateful for these people that went through pure hell. And when you think about it, our ancestors that had to leave the Caribbean and went to Africa, you know what they went through. Now look at us, that we're doing well. So I'm hoping our children can not just see us, but they will see where, you know, where we got our strength from. And we got our strength from our parents, who got their strength from all the hell that they went through, you know, to be able to find a safe place to be okay and get away from all the slavery. So hopefully our young people will not just look at all that they have available to them today, because they have much more than we could have ever had. You know, our children right here, they have much more than we had when we came to the US. So sometimes they don't realize what it took for them to have this. You know, they leave college and right away they're able to buy a home. We came here, we went to those little apartments, we pay our rent, you know, and and did quite a bit just to make sure they had enough. So I saw my mother cry. She made I saw tears in her eyes when she was afraid, you know, that whether her kids were going to have something. So I'm hoping the young generation would be very, very grateful and pay tribute to these people that give up their lives for them so they will have a life. You know, like Christ died on the cross so we will live again. We've seen people went through hell and pretty much gave up their lives so that they will have a better life. So hopefully they'll be able to realize, and we have to be the ones to tell the story. Because if we do not tell the story, they will not know. And my nieces, even Lolia, her generation right now, our children, there's a whole group of them that are trying to write our family history because what they're doing, they really want to know where they come from. Because all they know they're here. And I'm very, very happy that they're doing this. So they're gathering the older people and us, and they're asking questions and trying to put the puzzle together. You know, and I remember us being with Andy Bernice one time, and we were talking about land, you know, in Crozierville and stuff like that. And then one of my nieces and nephew, I'm not sure which one, yelled and said, "Oh my God, we're rich." And I said, "Oh no, you're not rich." You know, I said, "You may have some land in Crozierville, but if you're not doing anything on that land, you're not rich." You know, but but I remember how their thoughts quickly turned and the questions quickly turned to, "Can you tell me more about that? Oh, so which president were we related to, and which, where is this land, and how?" And all the questions started coming up, and now they're asking more questions. And when they get together, they forget us because they all are just chattering and chattering because they just want to have that relationship. You know, we had a better experience. We all live in Liberia. We had relationship with our cousins, who we consider not really cousins, but practically sisters and brothers. And our children today don't really have that because we're all spread out all over the world. So they're not able to really appreciate that whole family of different generations being together. We had that. And that's what, the family reunions are so important because these kids, and when they get there, they're anxious to talk to the older people because they want to understand where they come from. Because when you understand where you come from, then sometimes it's a little clearer where you're going. So if these kids now can understand what their parents went through, and if they know the story, they'll probably be able to appreciate what their ancestors have done for them, and then to give tribute to them.